it really takes that leap of faith to become an entrepreneur. And I think it comes down to, again, the individual making a decision. What defines security to me? Is security to me a corporate job that gives me a salary? Or is security to me depending upon myself to earn my own living? I think when you wrestle with that, and you probably wrestle with that more in the School of Entrepreneurship than you do in, say, maybe the business school or some other school. And when you wrestle with that, I think you come to the natural conclusion that if I go to work for a corporation, I could be fired any day. If you understand that as an entrepreneur, you wake up unemployed every day, it's kind of the same safety net.
Tim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Hey, pleasure to be here.
My first question, with all the experience you have with all the entrepreneurs that you've helped over your career, the families that you've helped with their wealth, and just the investors that you've kind of guided in terms of entrepreneurial, what to invest in, what not to, what has been, from your perspective, what creates the most enduring success?
There's an old adage, do you invest in the jockey or the horse? And I think over time, it has never come more true than investing in the jockey. You could say it another way. You could say, would you rather invest in a B management team and an A business plan, or a B business plan and an A management team? That's how critical talent is to startups. So, there's a phrase that we use at the Tamiami Angel Fund. We don't call them management teams, we call them execution teams, because execution is the critical factor. And so that's how important talent is, because you're gonna have to pivot, right? It's a roller coaster as an entrepreneur. You're gonna hit the valley and you're gonna say, what next? And as long as you've studied like Albert Einstein and the definition of insanity, like doing something over and over again the same way and expecting a different result, you'd say, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. I've got to pivot. I've got to think about this problem a different way, look at it from a different angle. So that's innate to people. And if they can do that, then they're special, then they're an entrepreneur.
So then what creates a great jockey?
Like I said, I think part of it's innate. I guess, there's an argument out there, right? Are entrepreneurs born, or can you teach them? Thus the explosion of the School of Entrepreneurship at FGCU and all across the country. And I believe both are true. I believe there are people that are born pure entrepreneurs, but I think there's an entrepreneurial spirit inside of anyone and everyone. And you sometimes have to awaken that, and you do that through education. And then I think it's just, Jim Collins has a book called Good to Great. And he says that the best leaders are those that can operate at the intersection of personal humility and professional drive. And so I think humility is really important, because I think we've all met the entrepreneur that tries to be everything. And sometimes that works, but more often than not, it doesn't work because they've just tried to do too much. They'll get burned out. So humility and self-reflection to be able to say, this is what I'm good at, this is what I'm not good at, and surround yourself with a team that addresses those areas of weakness or the areas that you're not good at. That's true entrepreneurship and operating at that intersection of personal humility and professional drive.
Yeah, because it's interesting. My experience, obviously I went to FGCU and I was a firsthand of that nature versus nurture part of entrepreneurship. I was lucky to be around my co-founder who grew up in the entrepreneurial environment. His grandfather was an entrepreneur. His uncle was an entrepreneur. He has a whole family lineage of entrepreneurs. So for him, it was more obvious. It was easier to kind of clear the dust of your childhood to understand who you're meant to be.
Right.
For me, it was a little bit different. I grew up with a single mom who, love her to death, was preaching stability and, security, and don't go be a salesman, go find a salary job. Like, love her for it. She's happy where we're at now. But for me, it wasn't like, I didn't know it was born in me. It took me getting to school, meeting somebody who had seen that in me. I mean, at the time I was participating in Greek life, I was participating in student government, I was participating in all these different facilities. I didn't like government, even student government. I wasn't a fan of it because of the I had all these ideas and I wanted to push them forward, and I wanted to help market the school, and I really wanted to do all these cool things. And I just ran into red tape after red tape after red tape. And I was having this discussion with my now business partner, and I was like, it's so frustrating, whatever. And he was like, you know what I think you should do? I think you should go find somebody that's building a company right now, that's trying to start a company, and you should go market for them, because innately you want to spread the word. I think you have this in you. I think you're an entrepreneur. Luckily, he did that. I took that, and then obviously I met Dr. Kawanui. I changed my major. It was the biggest fight I ever had with my mom until I told her I was dropping out of school. Because she was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not a real major. But luckily for me, and what my question is to you, the school teaches the basics, the core foundation of how to build a company. You have a problem, find a solution, total addressable market, all of the foundational pieces that you don't learn on YouTube. You don't learn, like, it was a really good school for that. What was the inspiration for that school for you? Like, how did it come to be?
Well, it was a larger vision. When I moved to Southwest Florida in 2002, I came down here to Naples and was looking for a job. I wanted to get into the financial world, specifically private equity, venture capital, or M&A. And I was in Naples, Florida, and there was nothing.
Really?
And I did find one small boutique firm, which I ended up joining, that did M&A with private companies. And obviously, Southwest Florida is a huge quality of place. And I said, I think I want to stay here the rest of my life. I want to raise my family here.
Yeah.
The beaches are great. The sunsets are great. And the weather's great. And I said, but when my kids go through schooling and then they go to college, there's like no depth in this job market. It's a one and done business environment. And so I said, here's the thing that I can pay back the region, or pay it forward, is help to create an innovation economy. Because at that time we were, as a regional economy, kind of a three-legged stool. Real estate construction was one leg, tourism is the other leg, and agriculture. And if you really look at the statistics, we're still driven a lot by that. But I wanted to be part of I guess, an initiative to add a fourth leg to that school, which was innovation and knowledge-based industries. So that's what drove a lot of my volunteer work. It drove a lot of my efforts to get involved with Florida Gulf Coast University, and then even now the Tamiami Angel Fund. But I knew the university was going to be an important driver of our regional economy. It is our 4-year comprehensive institution as part of the state university system. And so it's going to have an outsized impact in our region. And I started guest lecturing in the business school. I met Dr. Kawanui, who was a business school professor at that point. And we just kind of naturally had an affinity all around innovation and entrepreneurship. And one day I remember sitting in her office and I'm like, do you ever think FGCU could have a school of entrepreneurship? And she's like, possibly, but who would be crazy enough to do it? And I said, aren't we both entrepreneurs? Don't we like a challenge? Let's go do it.
Yeah.
And little by little, we started to carve away at it. And now it's got its own building and its own school. And
It's
on the Princeton Review for a couple of years. And then just recently, this is breaking news, I was elected to be the chair of the School of Entrepreneurship Advisory Council. So I'll be starting in the fall, taking over for Adria Starkey.
What do you think creates a good school to teach what is so, what is a lot of soft skills of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think I'll give you why I think FGCU is so effective. And part of it is the fact that it is not part of the College of Business. Because since the School of Entrepreneurship is not part of the College of Business, it doesn't have to adhere to the same accreditation standards that the College of Business does. There's a different accrediting body, and that accrediting body that accredits schools of entrepreneurship allow for more adjunct professors than actual full professors, which require a PhD. So you
Got
can
it.
bring in adjuncts that are real live business people with expertise in all these different areas and get them to teach students. Whereas in the College of Business, if you have too many adjuncts and not enough full professors with PhDs, it could impact your accreditation. We don't have that limit at the School of Entrepreneurship.
That is so cool. What I have to say from my experience in it, Annie Stout, I don't know if she still works there, but Annie was one of my teachers right at the cusp of what was happening. And she was more of a therapist than a professor. I would go to her office hours and just sit there and be like, this is everything I'm doing. This is everything I'm trying to do. What do you think? Like, I'm like, I know it's been hard for me to show up to class. I know it's been difficult. Like, I hope you don't hate me as a student, but like, and it was so cool because when I was in the School of Business and when I was in these other, the professors, again, it's no shade on either side, but they were very much like, if you weren't the perfect student, you weren't there. Like they wouldn't even give you the time of day. Like they would just pretty much bypass you entirely. She was so caring of the understanding of what I was trying to do. She saw the vision of what I was trying to do, and she would sit with me. In our office hours, I would learn more about the class itself. I forget what it was, but I wasn't necessarily learning a ton in the class because I was actually doing it. But she was able to sit with me in the office hours and just work through this. So it's so funny that you say that, because my goal in terms of what I'm doing right now is to help, like, to participate in the School of Entrepreneurship in that exact same way, to one day get to sit down with a kid that was me and say, go. Like that, Annie was the person when I got to the end of the semester where I was like, do you think I should come back next semester? And she goes, no, I think you got it. And so that's so cool. I want to ask you, what is, for people that don't know, what's the biggest difference between an angel fund and a traditional venture capital fund?
Sure. So angel investors are that's just kind of slang for what's called an accredited investor. An accredited investor is defined by the SEC as a sophisticated person that understands the financial world and understands the risk of investing in early stage private companies. They define that as a person who has $1 million of liquid net worth minus their primary residence, or someone that earns $200,000 AGI, adjusted gross income, in the last 2 years with an expectation to earn the same amount in the current year.
Got it.
So accredited investors are angel investors. Angel investors can operate individually. They can go out and invest on their own, or they can work inside of a group of angel investors formed as a network, or they can operate as a group formed inside of a fund, a committed capital fund. So that's what the Tamiami Angel Fund is. Now, the difference between an angel fund and a venture capital fund is a venture capital fund is set up as a partnership with limited partners and general partners. The limited partners supply the money to the general partners who make the investment decisions. Those general partners are full-time at it every single day, looking for new deals. They're financial professionals. They know how to do due diligence. They know how to structure term sheets. So the limited partners will listen to the general partners' investment prospectus and say, what sector are you going at? Why are you really smart in this area? Do you have all the networks and the deal sourcing for this? okay, let's say it's a healthcare sector focused fund. And the limited partners will say, okay, I believe in you. I'm going to give you my money to go into the fund because I'm trusting you to make the decision. So from an economic perspective, you have an economic model called 2x20. The general partners charge the limited partners 2% management fee on an annual basis of the committed capital in the fund.
Got it.
And then they also say a 20% carried interest on the profit from the fund. So you create alignment. The LP is saying, I think you're super smart. I think you're going to make money. But just to make sure, I'm going to pay you a salary through the management fee, and I'm going to give you 20% of the profit to further align our interests. With an angel fund, you don't have a GP LP structure. The LPs are actually called members, and the members decide what they're going to invest in. There is no general partner. So we have to use a different investment governance structure. We use democratic voting. So it's democratic voting at various processes of our cycle, and it's all triggered off of supermajorities.
That's very cool. That's very interesting. Now, talking a little bit more about Southwest Florida, because I had this assumption when I was in college. Everybody, when they were at FGCU, they were like, I'm either going to Tampa, or I'm going to Fort Lauderdale, or I'm going to Miami. That's like the kind of disbursement once you leave.
Sure. Or Atlanta.
And I would tell Jace every day, I go, the person that sticks around, that has the entrepreneurial mindset, is going to make a lot of money here. I don't think people, and I kept saying it, I don't think people really understand what actually lives here in terms of quality of life, all that type of thing. Selfishly, I want this to be an Austin, a San Francisco. Practically, what do we have to do to get there?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ingredients that you have to have for an innovation economy. And I think you're right. This region has, the way I describe it is we're kind of an emerging region, right? And that can be tough because it creates, you don't have built-in infrastructure for that innovation economy that I was talking about earlier. But Dick Pegnetter, who was a former president of FGCU, he told me one time, he's like, Tim, you can't look at it as a negative that we don't have all this infrastructure. He's like, think of it this way. Think of it as a journey of building a railroad. And if you've got existing infrastructure, you have to go rip out old track before you can lay down new track. He's like, in Southwest Florida, you can just lay down new track. There isn't the old track in place, which means you don't have an old guard, and you don't have people saying that's not the way we used to do things around here. So I think from that perspective, it's a wide open canvas for you to attack. And, I'll expand on that. In 2007 and 8, we convened a study called the Southwest Florida Regional Angel Fund Assessment to try and predict whether we could do something bold and ambitious, like start the first ever angel fund in Southwest Florida. And we looked at the region, and we found out of 6 different factors that would predict success for an angel fund, we only had 1 out of 6.
Wow.
But it was the most important one, potential angel community. So what we said was, let's go do it. Because if you hear from entrepreneurs and startups, what do they need the most? What are they lacking? They're always going to say access to capital. And so we said, well, maybe we could just organize private capital here in Southwest Florida, do our part. We can't solve all 6 of the critical factors, but we can clearly solve one that is ranked usually the most important. So let's go do that. And that's really what the battle cry was for the Tamiami Angel Fund. Number 1 was, let's go out and attack this critical factor, organize private capital, get it into a fund structure so that we can start deploying capital into startups.
What do you think, where do you still think we have, like, because I think about this all the time with our company, like we're a podcast, like the way that we set this company up 4 years ago when it started anybody that I talked to in the space of like, hey, would you be interested in our services? It was an education before it was a sale.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you mean podcasting? What do you mean social media? Like what? I don't need that. Like, or whatever the situation was. And at first it was really discouraging. And my eyes were looking at like Fort Lauderdale, Miami, whatever. I would, for some reason, sat in the pocket. And over time, what I've seen in the last 4 years has been a huge change. Everybody is now understanding what we're doing. And not only we were literally the first people to offer these services in this area. Right. So we are at this intersection now of like the perfect, success kind of formula, which is you're the first to market. You have something that other people can't right now duplicate in terms of like specific knowledge. And then you also have what you just said, which is we, as a service business, we are run by our clients. Our clients are our capital partners at the end of the day. They run the company from that perspective. And there's a plethora of them. There's so many of these people that want to participate in legacy, that want to start a media company in their own way. And it was so cool. But where do you think we still have the gap to cross to get to, like, my dream of this place is the fact that we could potentially have like an Austin, Texas, is it going to be me as somebody who wants to bring this along? Like when I'm 40, 50, are we going to start to see that? Like, what do you think the timeline and what do you think we need to do to get there?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things in your question, and there might be some things I'll touch on from some of your previous questions. I mean, clearly cost of living is a huge issue, right? Affordable housing, workforce housing, whatever you call it. Your startup gritty entrepreneurs don't buy $1 million homes, right? They're startup gritty. They want apartments and the cheapest apartment they can find, or they need a garage studio and the whole management team eats, sleeps, and works there. I mean, look at like the movies like Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a cost issue that you got to think about here. I also think that for a period of time, we didn't understand, what it takes to attract a tech dev community. Wikipedia used to be up in Tampa, Florida. That's where they started. And then they moved out of the state of Florida. And when they asked the CEO, why did you move? He's like, because the best technical people have pink hair, tattoos, and nose rings. And when they walk down the streets in the business area of Tampa, people look at them strange. Wow. And so there's kind of this acceptance of the creative class. If you read a book by Richard Florida, it's called The Rise of the Creative Class. He talks about what the elements are to truly have a sustainable innovation economy. And one of those is you've got to have the creative class, and those creative class people, those innovators, walk through life to a different drum and look a lot different than either you or I, the way we're dressed. And there's got to be some acceptance of that in order to really have it sustainable, because there's such a creative element there. Your question earlier too was you shared about your discussion with your mom about leaving the changing your majors to entrepreneurship. And we talked earlier about everybody being an entrepreneur, anyone and everybody being an entrepreneur. But it really takes that leap of faith to become an entrepreneur. And I think it comes down to, again, the individual making a decision that what defines security to me, right? Is security to me a corporate job that gives me a salary, or is security to me depending upon myself to earn my own living? And I think when you wrestle with that, and you probably wrestle with that more in the School of Entrepreneurship than you do in, say, maybe the business school or some other school. And when you wrestle with that, I think you come to the natural conclusion that if I go to work for a corporation, I could be fired any day, right? And if you understand that as an entrepreneur, you wake up unemployed every day, it's kind of the same safety net. And I think it's better, me personally, and I think people come to the conclusion that they say, I'd rather depend upon myself than someone way up in an ivory tower that's going to tell me maybe today I'm good, tomorrow I'm fired. So that's where I think entrepreneurship drives. And so the next comment I had, weaving in a lot of the questions you had, you have to have an acceptance of failure if you go down the route of entrepreneurship. And so I think that's one of the greatest things in the United States. It's why entrepreneurship is still the best thing that we do. And it's the best. That's why people from around the world come here, because we do believe in underdogs and we believe in giving people a second chance. And I think that's important for our region to understand when you start looking at the right kind of ingredients for an innovation economy and what's missing. And I think we're getting there, and you can look at Arthrex as a shining example of entrepreneurship. They're hiring something like 1,000 people a year for the next 5 years, so 5,000 people. Yeah, it outpaces our region's ability to supply the labor force for that and the expertise. So they ended up moving up to Clemson and starting a partnership with them and having a location in South Carolina. But entrepreneurship can happen here. Innovation can happen here. And you can do it at a scale where you become a global leader like Arthrex has. So I think Reinhold Schmieding has proven the model out, and he's a trailblazer and an incredible story. And he serves now as a role model for others.
I mean, I look like when I think about what I would love to build, and I talk about it with the guys all the time. I think everybody has their goals and go in terms of going into entrepreneurship, and this is kind of what I want to get into next. It's you have the money driven people, like money is good, but I think just with my like personal values, I look at entrepreneurship as the ability to provide great things, like to create great things in the world, and also to create jobs for people that deserve it. And so one of my goals that I talk to Jace about all the time, and sometimes he laughs at me, I'm like, I would love to be one of the #1 employers in Southwest Florida. Like that's a real life goal for me, because I would love to just, I believe in like what you talk about and what you saw back in 2007, 2008. That's what I see now. And it fires me up, because it's like to be a part of that at this phase of it, where you still see it's like just barely getting. Arthrex is again a great example of it, but like people go to Arthrex, for example, and they love what they do. They love working there. They have created an amazing environment for their employees, and I commend them for it. That is the standard that you get to set when you're that trailblazer in an area like this. Right. You're able to create a quality of living that other people, when you're competing against a lot of other companies, I just don't know that it's that important. Usually it's a salary or whatever. But going back to the point, why I think like the Estero area is so important for what you're talking about from a quality of living side. I was lucky to be able to, I still live in San Carlos Park. If I didn't have San Carlos Park and the amount of apartments that they're building around that area, and then being able to have my business in Naples. So yes, it's a 35-minute, 40-minute drive. Yes, that stinks, whatever. But I'd rather do that than have to pay, $2,000, $3,000 in rent here.
That's right. In
this early phase of building. I'm interested from your perspective. I want to get into like the wealth management side, what you do at Fifth Ave Family Office. What is that environment like, and how does it differ from like the work that you do with FGCU and the Tamiami Fund and all those types of things? Like, how is it different? How's your day-to-day different?
Yeah, it's different, but I guess it's somewhat similar. So I mentioned that when I came down to Naples, I started with a small boutique M&A consultancy, and it took me 9 months to get fired.
And spoken like a true entrepreneur.
Yeah, and so after I got fired, I talked to my wife, and I was like, I can do this on my own. So I started my own M&A consultancy called Compass Advisory Group. And I just started going out to family-owned businesses and asking them about succession planning or exit strategy planning. Succession planning being, do you have somebody inside your family, or do you have a management team that can take this business over? Exit strategy is, I don't have either of those, and I've got to go find a third party to buy the business. Because, you know, you talk about entrepreneurs, and there's two things I wanted to mention about entrepreneurs, and I'll get back to the family office. One is, the worst thing an entrepreneur can say when they go out day one as their entrepreneur is to say, I'm an entrepreneur because I don't want to work for anybody else.
Yeah,
Then
the
you
biggest fallacy.
you learn very quickly. If you're a good entrepreneur, you work for your customer. They are the top in the pyramid, and you are a servant to them. If you don't get that right, you don't have a successful business. So entrepreneurship is not about being your own boss. It's about still having a boss. They're called a customer. But yeah, I would go out, and the second thing about an entrepreneur is you need to have an end in mind when you start with something, right? And I think after the thrill and the honeymoon of starting the business and achieving some early success, you start thinking about, why did I start this business? Because if I don't have a succession plan to pass it on to somebody in my family or my management team, and I'm not going to sell it, I'm just going to close the front doors of the business at some point, then you've taken the maximum risk and just been an employee. You've never really taken the harvested the fruit of your labor and your sweat equity. So you really do need to start with an end in mind. And I would talk to families about that and business partners, and they'd say, you know what, we do need to do some planning. So I'd come in, I'd help them do some planning, and then we'd get into the execution phase of either a succession plan or an exit strategy. Let's talk just specifically about exit strategies. So selling to a third party. It's either a financial buyer or a strategic buyer. A strategic buyer is somebody that's in your industry or that's adjacent to your industry, but it's going to add your service line or your product line to their existing business. Financial buyer is a private equity company, private equity fund. So in the capital continuum, there's friends and family and founders. Then there's angels networks and funds. Then there's venture capital at the next stage. And then ultimately there's private equity. And then there's typically go public or sell to another larger private equity fund. But a financial buyer is typically a private equity fund. So we'd talk about the different buyers, and I'd do the education process, and they'd say, Tim, let's go sell the business. Well, you'd go through a 6 to 12 month process with that family. You have to know everything about them. How many family members are employed, what the add backs are that aren't gonna, when it's a privately owned business, the private owners can spend money on anything. They could spend money on a country club, and they could say this is marketing and meals and entertainment because I bring customers, and it's a legitimate business expense. Under new ownership, they'd say, no, that's profit that we're going to distribute to our shareholders. So you have to go through this whole process of going through their P&L and recasting what their free cash flow is or their EBITDA is. And so you get to know them, you're with them every single day. When you finally sell the business, it's a great day. It's a huge success. They've had this baby for so long, and now they've finally got the liquidity event. They look at all this money that they've made, and they look over to you and they're like, wow, you helped me create this huge nest egg. Now you need to help me figure out how to invest it. And I'd say, you know what? That's not me. I'm kind of a M&A guy. I'm a deal junkie.
I was going to say,
I'm
that's what I heard.
finance guy. I want to go get the next deal done. I want to do creative structuring. And so I couldn't help them manage the wealth, the liquidity event. When I was down here in Naples, I met my business partner, Gary Price, at Fifth Avenue Family Office now. And he was managing family money. And I knew that he shared my Judeo-Christian values. I knew he was not going to, mess up. He was going to do things the right way. He's going to understand the needs of the family. He was going to invest from a perspective of protect and grow, not chase alpha unnecessarily and risk this nest egg that was created by the sale of a 30-year-old business or a 50-year-old business or a second or third generation business. The first rule is protect it, and then the second rule is to grow. So I met him, and I said to my family business owners, here's the guy to manage your wealth. Well, it started to work so well together. We came together and put our businesses together, and we realized when you look at a family who has a pretty expansive balance sheet, we talk about the whole wallet. They have a balance sheet where their investments are in real estate, venture capital, private equity, maybe closely held businesses or family held businesses, stocks and bonds, art collections. They have boats, they have cars. Hopefully they don't have a plane, because owning a plane is a whole different unique challenge. Maybe they have a NetJets card, or they do brokerage through aviation. And we can help families do manage all of those assets. And so we said, you know what we really have by combining our business? We have a family office. And instead of being dedicated to just one family, we open ourselves up to multiple families. And that created a multifamily office. So we guide and advise on all of those asset classes, which also means we need to be smart from an estate planning perspective and do the right things with trusts and foundations to help our families truly have multi-generational wealth.
I want to come back to the values, because I think that's really, really important, because I've heard you speak on that before. But talking about investment strategies for entrepreneurs post-exit, this is something that I've thought a lot about. I am 25 years old. I think nothing about investing. I think about building the company and growing the company, and that's all I obsess about all day. And most of when I see like the younger entrepreneur, like the 18, like the 14 to 18 that I can kind of mentor and I feel like I can speak on to a little bit, I'm always like, they're always like, oh, I'm getting into crypto and I'm getting into like, I'm day trading and all that. And I'm like, listen, that's a fine strategy, but it's not going to get you to where either you got to be, that is your thing, or you have to find your thing. And something that I always talk about on this podcast specifically is, what is play to you and work to others is what you're going to win at.
Right.
So your ability to find that, but then you get to this phase that you're talking about, 10, 20, 30 years from now, whenever this business either sells or, I succeed on, there will be a point where I'm going to be like, I have all this money and I have no idea what to do with it. How do you guys strategize? Because I know you're not the wealth strategist particularly, but what does your partner kind of go through in terms of the right investments? How do you differentiate, like, okay, we have toys that we're going to buy with this? Like, is there a structure? Is there a framework? Any mental models that people could take away?
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be unique for each family that we serve. The joke in our industry is, when you've met one family, you've met one family, because every other family is completely different. But I would say that if you're an entrepreneur, you've got a family business because your family's going to be involved in it. If you're single, there's only one family member involved in it. But like you said, your mom's involved in it.
Yeah.
She wants to hear how it's going. Your wife potentially will be involved in it, and your kids are involved in it because that's how you put food on the table. So it's really a family business. So when you think about that, owners of family business probably have 85% of their net worth tied up. That's their single largest asset in their portfolio. And that's what creates this uncomfortableness when that becomes liquid cash. It's like, oh my gosh, now what do I do with all of this cash? Because I didn't know I had this much cash. Early on, as you're building your business, I think the smartest investment you can make is real estate. There's not a multi-generational family that has wealth that doesn't have real estate as a core holding. And so, yeah, you can go into crypto, and I'm not anti-crypto, but you have to define what your investment horizon is. Is it day trading and you're going to go up and down with the market? You better have a lot of Pepto-Bismol or Rolaids with you, because that's tough. Plus, the taxes aren't really aren't a great incentive, because the two negatives to return are fees and taxes. And if you're trading on like Coinbase and they just charge you fee after fee after fee, and then you get hit with taxes because it's not long-term gain, it's short-term gain, you start to think about, I don't know, plus all the internal like indigestion you have. It's like, is this really a career? And maybe it isn't. It's a good buy and hold strategy. I think Bitcoin's at a little over 100,000 right now. So, if you think it's going to go to 500,000, then it's a 5X. Over what period of time? Buy a coin, sit on it, buy and hold. And I do think it's digital capital. I do think that crypto has a place in a person's portfolio.
That's really cool.
But yeah, we'll take a look at a liquidity event, and then we do something called an IPS, an investment policy statement, which goes through each one of the asset classes, and we get a target percentage ownership in each one of those asset classes. And one of the things that people don't think about initially is what's called a deployment schedule. So if you said you wanted 20% in real estate, you wanted 10% in commodities, you want 40% in bonds or fixed income, and then that leaves 30% for stock, you don't go out and buy that portfolio day one, right? You've got to deploy that capital over time, and you got to be smart about it. And so we put together a deployment schedule. We don't manage money, we manage the managers. So we'll go out and find the top decile managers in each one of these asset classes and work with them. And then because of the aggregation that we can bring, because we've got multiple families, we qualify at the tier pricing that really, really saves our families. So that's kind of some of the secret to our business model is manage the managers, sit on the same side of the table as the family and really advocate for them so that there's no conflicts of interest. It's not, hey, you should choose this fund because we're getting a kickback on from the fund. We can measure them purely on performance. And when they don't perform, we rotate out of them and really, do the right thing for the family.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, I love that. Back to the values piece. I'm lucky because I didn't know this when I started. I remember Dr. Kaunui sitting with me and being like, hey, make sure whoever you partner with, you plan as if the sky is going to fall and plan like everything's going to go, down. But you don't think about that when you're starting a company. You just never do. You're always like, oh, no, this person's like my,
It's the honeymoon phase.
It's the honeymoon phase. And I was lucky because Jace and I had a relationship for like 3 or so years, both in this sense of like we understood what was right and wrong in the world, and we would have conversations about it. And then we started this business. And when people talk about that, the honeymoon phase, it's not until you start making real money that your core values are tested to the maximum. Because when you see a certain dollar sign, some people's character does crumble underneath the weight of that money. I'm interested, what have you seen in terms of like, what are the core things you should look for in a like business partner?
Yeah, character's revealed only in crisis. Everything else is a perception. You can perceive, well, this is my best friend. This is a great person. You go into business with them. And then when you don't have any money left in the bank and you're signing the front of the check, not the back of the check, and it's like, we can't pay ourselves. What are we going to do? and you come to the conclusion we got to put more money in. It's like, ooh, wow, are you going to do that? I mean, am I going to do that? And that's when character's revealed. So you've really got to do your best job of discerning who that person is and what kind of character they're going to have in crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there's any secret formula to it. It's just spending a lot of time. I think you should pray about it. And I think you should search for somebody with Judeo-Christian values, because there's a whole idea of servant leadership as a concept taught by Jesus that I think is a critical component to being a business partner, because the best partners I've had are the ones that were willing to put me in front of them. And likewise, I'm willing to put them in front of me. And that's when it's like, hey, tell you what, you pay yourself this month, and then I'll pay myself next month. And in 2 months, we should be out of this tight spot. And when you're fighting over who should be paid first with the only dollars in the bank account, you probably have the right partner.
Yeah, it's funny because the fact that you're saying that just always reconfirms like the relationship that I have with my business partner. When we were first starting, he had a full-time job, and that was like a part of the conversation. It's like, I have a full-time gig. You're going all in on this thing. You know, we're 50-50 partners because of that. Like, let's go. Like, let's do this. He had a lot of knowledge, a lot of resources, what have you. So that aspect of it lined up. But when we made our first check, I remember calling him, and again, we didn't have any money. I really didn't have any money. And I called him and I was like, hey, I know we just made, I think it was like $280. I was like, do you mind? I need to get groceries. Right. Like, do you mind if can I get groceries? And he was like, yeah. Right. Sent it right away. And like, you might overlook that, but like, then when the moment comes when there's a lot of money, when there's a lot of stakes at hand, it's falling back on those same exact principles of being like, okay, no, I'm going to take care of you. And we both have shown up. Like, it's a lesson that I've had to learn in terms of like understanding that you have to, like, in a business partnership, it's a marriage. There's sacrifice that goes along with that. You don't think about that when you go into business. You're just like, oh, this is just somebody that I started a business with. But no, there's a lot more to that. And learning that sacrifice is a part of, like, you do, like you said, put somebody in front of yourself. When you think about the hard times that you've experienced in your career, I've recently reconnected with my faith, so I feel really comfortable like talking about this. One of the hardest points in any entrepreneur's journey is the crisis moments. And for me, I had used a lot of things to rely on that, whether it be vices, whether it be, just unhealthy habits, I think. And most people can understand that. Most people have been there. Prayer, like falling back on something really sturdy. How has that helped you throughout your business career?
Yeah, I think it's essential. With Fifth Avenue Family Office, we don't hide the fact that we're faith-led. Mm-hmm. We tell people, our prospects and our new hires, we're not faith-based. We're not a charity. We're faith-led. We're still capitalists. We believe in earning a dollar. It's just that we look at a dollar bill as a certificate of appreciation. It's not a dollar bill. And if we do things that people really appreciate, they'll give us more certificates of appreciation. And then we get to, go share those certificate of appreciation with other people of goods and services and products that we want. Yeah, I think that's critical. And so every company meeting we have, we start it with a prayer.
Very cool.
Every company meal that we have, even when we're out at restaurants, because we go out and celebrate milestones and people's birthdays and work anniversaries and professional milestones, we say a prayer before we eat. And then personally, I am in my email at the bottom of my signature line, I put a Bible verse in it. That's awesome. Just to let people know. And people have called me both ways. Somebody's called me and said, man, I opened up my Bible right away and read that verse, and it was really impactful for me. And then I've had people call me and they say, you just destroyed your business. And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, because you're a Bible thumper, you're a Bible beater. And I'm like, no, I'm not. You got to get all the way down to the bottom of my email to read that. And there's some reason why you went all the way down past my address, my telephone number, past the confidentiality clause. Do not distribute this. If you receive this in error, delete this. And then under that delete message is the scripture. So they found that for a reason. And I guess I'm really, really comfortable where, I'm called to spread the gospel to the four corners of the earth, just like all of us. And I kind of figure the easiest way to do that is through email.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm ever going to get to all four corners of the earth.
Yeah.
And if somebody doesn't want to do business with me because I'm doing that, that's fine. It's called self-selection and it works. And I think that's where the faith part comes in too, is we've got a great team and they know our culture, they know our faith, and not everybody's of the same faith. We have other faiths represented, but they just know how they're going to be treated. So I think it's critical, and I think it's good for your values.
It's the idea of being on purpose. Like in our company, starting in January, I was going to Ocean Church. And I felt, God calling on my life to say like, hey, I always say our mission is to educate and inspire the world. Like I genuinely believe that when I started Grit Mentality back in the day, my only goal was like, let me be a shining light. Let me try with what I know to try to be a shining light. And I remember being wrestled at that point to be like, you're 22. You don't have all the stories to tell yet.
Right.
Go find people that do. You have a skill building platforms. Go do that for others and help them, expand their mission. And I was sitting in church one day and I had all these questions and I was like, what if I sat him down on a podcast every week and just asked him the questions that I have?
Right.
And I set up a meeting, pitched it to him, and he was like, wow, that's crazy. Cause at my team meeting this morning, they also were asking like, we should start a podcast. So it was this perfect, like synchronistic, like meeting of the minds or whatever. But we started doing that. And that's a part of our marketing now. So we have this show, which is Piece of Grit. And then we have the other 6 days, which is our faith-based podcast. And, what I think about it the same way, like some people might see that and be like, oh, they're Bible thumpers, whatever. It doesn't matter to me, especially in service industry. Like we're both kind of in two different worlds of service. But like when you understand that your client is your boss in the service world,
That's right.
You might as well be selective with, I'm fine with that signaling of like, this is who I am. Because then when the people come in and they align on those same values, we have a great partnership. But sometimes the young entrepreneurs that I talk to are willing to sacrifice their own values for that certificate of appreciation that we're talking about. I'd be interested, this is something I'm always curious of. What do you think is worth the money versus what's not worth the money?
As it relates to,
It's like spending money rather, like in terms
in your business, in your personal life, or
more personal life. Like, what do you think is worthwhile of like helping some, the people that have the Lamborghini as their background on their screensaver right now? Like, you've met a lot of people that have exited a lot of businesses, and I'd imagine you've seen stuff that you're like, yeah, they thought that was going to be worth it, but it wasn't. And I'm interested to get your take.
Sure. We have a concept, again, it's kind of a biblical concept of first fruits. So when we harvest at our company, we take 10%, and you can have this whole argument as a company or as an individual, is the 10% on gross or is it on net? And pretty soon you may start out coming from net, but ultimately you get to gross and you say, okay, we're going to take the first 10% as a first fruit offering and give that away to charity. So
wow.
I think it's got to start with charity. And I'll tell you, just inside of our company, some of the best meetings we've had is when we open up a meeting and we say, hey, we just harvested because we helped a company sell their business, or a company or a family sell their business. or we had an exit from one of our portfolio companies. We've got X as a budget. Who should we give it to? And everybody's like, I got this charity. You should give to this. You know, we have to help out children's education, or we have to help out the shelter for abused women. And you have this lively discussion, and my partner and I sit back, and it's like, wow, that's just awesome.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think is really worth spending money on. And then as it relates to like personal, I'm pretty big on creating memories. So I'm big on spending money on travel.
Yeah.
I'm okay spending money on boats and you know, aviation and whatever, just to go create memories in exotic places or whatever you want to do.
That's,
So
yeah, I love that. That's something that I've always,
more memories than things.
because I've met so many, like, obviously I get to talk to business owners all day, and the people that invest into things most of the time, this is just my hypothesis, I don't know that this is true, but things create headaches. They create overhead. They create things that disrupt your peace most of the time. That's what I've seen. You have, like, a boat is a funny example, because it's like you have a boat. What is it? Boat is
A hole in
break out another 1,000. Isn't that what the acronym is?
It's a hole in the water you throw money into.
But in terms of creating experiences, it's a great vehicle to create experiences.
Sure.
But on the flip side, the person that's getting a boat for having a boat's sake, it's like, you know, that might not be what it is. To have the nice car, to have the biggest house possible. It's like, those are the things where at least I've had to drill it into my own head, because what I always worry about is the day that I do get that first, like, big liquidation, whether it be a first big distribution that we get to do as a company or whatever it is. That day will come, and based on how I value money is how I'm going to spend that money.
Yeah. And I'm not against nice things. I'm not against Lamborghinis or Ferraris. I think if you start, you know, with your first fruit, start with charity, and you've got excess left over, go do it. Go do stuff that makes you happy and that rewards you, because again, you probably started with the end in mind. And if you're sensible and you've learned your lessons through your business, you'll probably say, do I really need a house with 15 rooms in it? Or do I need just a nice house with 5 bedrooms in it?
Yeah.
You know, and hopefully some of the practicality will get you there. But yeah, I mean, there's examples of people that do reverse tithes. I know, like William Colgate, who started Colgate, you know, Palmolive. He did a reverse tithe where he would give 90% away and tried to live on 10%.
Wow.
And then Tom Monahan, who started Ave Maria, took a vow of poverty where he entered this world with no money. He's going to leave this world with no money. So he's trying to set up structures where, of course, he has to live, but by the time he passes on, he's going to have given everything away from his Domino Pizza fortune. So, you know, that brings up concepts of like, which I spoke of during the commencement speech in 2023 to FGCU, you know, role models, mentors, and heroes, and the difference in how you can use them. And some of my like heroes and role models are like the founding fathers of the United States. And that's where I think it also comes back to having faith. When you look at how hard it is to create a country in this world, you know,
Crazy.
you look at like, how was the United States created?
Yeah.
And it had to be God ordained, because you can't have an Alexander Hamilton, a Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, who like should have been shot and killed like 5 times on the battlefield, all come together, John Adams, and create this country. If it really wasn't a compact with God, which traces its way back to the Mayflower Compact, which traces its lineage back to the Magna Carta, and both those documents were instrumental, with a few other documents, to create the Declaration of Independence. That Declaration of Independence It is just an amazing document that's
Yeah.
been able to keep our country together. And that's God inspired.
You know what I love throughout this whole conversation is you've called back to books and to literature. I love reading, and I think every good entrepreneur has a strong appetite for reading. I'd be interested. What are like maybe one or let's just say one book that fundamentally changed the way that you think that people should dive into?
It's clearly Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren.
Okay.
I like Good to Great, Jim Collins, and there's a number of other great business books out there. But like I mentioned, I read a lot about the founding of the United States, but I've also recently started reading a book on Ulysses S. Grant, because even though he wasn't at the founding of our country, everybody looks at Abraham Lincoln for the Civil War. But if you don't bring in Ulysses S. Grant, you don't have the country that we have, because he said, one of his quotes is, people ask me if it was easier to win the war or win the peace. And it was harder to win the peace. So think of winning the war, conquering the South, and now having to unite the Union,
Wow.
right? And something that he did extremely controversial is he did not jail any of the military leadership of the Confederacy. He allowed them to go free. He also allowed them to carry their arms. They were free and could still carry their guns. And he thought that it was so important to show forgiveness in order to mend the wounds that, like Abraham Lincoln talked about. How are we ever going to mend the wounds and bind this country back together? It really fell on Ulysses S. Grant to do it, and he was a pivotal president in our history. So, yeah, there's so many other things. I'm also reading kind of a fun book called Blister in the Sun, which is about how Florida has gone through all these real estate cycles, and it's just fascinating to read.
Do you think that, like, do you think everybody should, let's say somebody's listening, they're like, I want to get into all this stuff, but like, I don't know. Should they follow their like what they are passionate about reading, or should they start with like core fundamentals of like good books, like, the 7 strategies of successful.
Successful.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
stuff like that.
How to win and influence
Uh-huh,
friends. Right?
yeah.
I think that in an ideal world, you come up with a plan. You plan the work and you work the plan, right? I want to have a certain amount of self-help. I want to have a certain amount of history. I want to have a certain amount of business knowledge. If I were to divide it, I would probably use those 3 personally. I think there's power in life and in anything. There's power in the rule of 3. It's like when you're giving examples, you go, well, there's example A, B, and C. You get into trouble when you try to go past C. You're like, well, and then there's the other one. I can't remember the other one right now. It's like in a PowerPoint presentation. It's like, don't use more than 3 colors.
Yeah,
Don't use more
yeah.
than 3 fonts. Like there's power in the rule of 3. So that, like, if I were to approach reading list, I'd probably define it in kind of 3 categories. Not that those have to remain the same for the rest of my life, but it would give me kind of some structure, and with structure, I plan the work the plan, and then I get accomplishment. That's a good feedback loop, and then I keep, rewarding myself with those kind of feedback loops.
Tim, this was such an awesome convo. Like, I seriously thoroughly enjoyed you taking the time. I could keep going for hours, but I'm gonna respectfully give you your time back. But thank you so much for coming on the show. If there's any way that people could support you, how would you like them to do so?
Well, I mean, the best way that you could support me is get active in the Southwest Florida community, wherever your passion is, because like I said, we're an emerging region. There's so much infrastructure, so much charitable work. There's so many people in need that follow your passion and just get connected with other people, get connected with charities, get connected with your church, get connected with the universities, with schools, even trade industries. One of the things that I've tried to inspire as we're creating this innovation economy is the Southwest Florida Regional Technology Partnership. They call it Southwest Florida Tech because we needed a place for tech people to hang out. Bio Florida now has a Southwest Florida chapter. It didn't for a while. So it could be anything and everything, but get connected and let's, create a tide that raises all the boats.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on.
You bet. Thank you.